You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. Now, let's begin. All right, Slick Talkers, welcome back to another episode. You know the drill. This week's guest is actually a bonus guest. We have been getting so much good feedback from the vacation rental technology landscape episode with Andrew Kitchell, and then even getting into distribution with Doug Truitt. So obviously when Wes was messaging me about the episode, I was like, hey, why don't you just come on the episode? Let's do something on the podcast together, get you to share your thoughts. And that's what we're here to do today. But before we jump into all the tech landscape pieces, we need to set the stage to learn a little bit more about Wes, about Direct and what you've been building. But also, are you feeling better, my friend? Last time we were supposed to record, we had to reschedule due to some sickness. So I'm hoping you're feeling better today.
I'm in tip-top shape. I've got three kids, 7, almost 5, and 1. Yeah, they're magical. I couldn't live without them. Changed my life for the better, but they're just filthy. They go to school and their classmates are snotty and they bring all that crap home. So it is what it is, but I'm all good.
Well, glad you're back. Glad you're in tip-top shape. I know I'm excited for this because, again, we've been getting such a good response from the original episode with Andrew that when you and I were messaging, I wanted to just be like, hey, instead of just talking about it offline, let's just get you on the podcast and go in. But for the listener's sake, Wes, if you could introduce yourself, your company, kind of where you got started in the industry and where you guys are at today, and then we'll jump in.
Sure. So I'm Wes Smithe, co-founder and CEO at Direct, which is a vertical SaaS platform offering asset management, booking, and back office software tools for vacation rental managers and RV rental managers. We also streamline distribution to top channels. We've got direct 2A integrations with the likes of Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, Expedia, Google Travel, RV Share, etc. Yeah, that's kind of a quick overview. I've been in short-term rental technology for 13 years this month, so it's pretty hard to believe it's been so long since I left the corporate grind. Yeah, I got started kind of in a very niche side of the space with game day housing, where we connected single-family homeowners in college football destinations with traveling fans for football game and commencement and other event-type weekends. That's kind of how I got into the business. It's always funny to hear stories of how people got into this business because it's always really random. But we then set out to launch a spinoff kind of competitor to Airbnb and Vrbo sometime in 2014-ish. And we ended up calling that Vase Days and integrated that with, at the time, the largest PMSs in the space. So it was V12, Escapia, and Streamline, and allowed us to kind of scale our supply of the two-sided marketplace quickly. Integrating with those systems was very challenging, and ultimately we unearthed a big opportunity to go to market with a more modern and scalable alternative, which is Direct, and that kind of started to be built from scratch sometime in 2018, around there. So we've been charging hard since then, and I'm excited to talk your ear off and vice versa.
I love it. Yeah. I love it because the whole point of podcasting is actually I'm supposed to be a better listener than I am a talker. So please make that job easy for me. Just kidding. Yeah, I know it's going to be really fun. But no, I love how everyone just seems to get in this industry by accident. It's like, oh, I was doing this one thing, and then all of a sudden it just led into vacation rentals or stumbled in by accident because I was solving a problem, and that problem turned into a bigger solution and wasn't just me. There's a whole world of people that, suffer from that same problem. That's what makes it really exciting because at the end of the day, like that's what connects us as entrepreneurs. We all got that similar story and drive. But I want to know, before going into more stuff about Direct and you, I want your honest opinion. When listening to the episode with Andrew and I, what were some immediate thoughts? And not even just thoughts, like, please let this be uncontrarian thinking, like, please let it be hot takes. Hot takes are welcome. We're open to, obviously, as you heard on the episode, I changed my mind on guidebooks. So if you have anything that you're like, oh, this one thing doesn't get talked about, or a lot of people have a different opinion than I do, I'm all ears.
Well, I would say uncontrarian would be the wrong word for me. I'm more on the contrarian side of things. But I guess what stuck out to me about the episode, there was a 15 to 20-minute exchange just about some of the shortcomings with technology. And I definitely agreed with a lot of Andrew's perspectives. I think number one, just the quality and ease of use and just interfaces and experiences. I think there's, especially with the really large incumbent PMSs, there's a lot of room for improvement there. And it's been kind of part of my thesis from the background I just provided, that increasingly consumers are users of high quality technology. So like back in 2017, 2018, Facebook, for instance, wasn't like the place for college kids only. Like my grandma was on it by then. And, they made it so easy that my grandma could use it, and that's only continued to get better. Yet you see some of these legacy systems, and this isn't just in our industry, but that don't seem to be innovating or caring about making the experience better for the user. So I think that was kind of the first thing that stuck out to me. And, even the way that we try to think and design our user experiences is to be as intuitive as possible, so that, to bring, my grandma or somebody else in the picture who's not even in the space or has no idea how to use or interpret this kind of an industry or system, to be able to sit her down and say, perform this task, usability test, just create a listing and have her be able to say, well, okay, well, there's listings, and I go there and there's the create listing button right there. Super simple example, but that's kind of the first thing that stuck out to me.
Well, I was going to say, when you and I were chatting on the pre-chat before this episode, there's one thing I think that kind of stood out when I got to kind of peek and see direct behind the scenes, and you were showing me some stuff, kind of mentioning your grandma, right? Like my grandma should be able to come in here, see listings. One of the things I think about, because we all experience, whether you're an Android user, an iPhone user, even though we all know iPhones are better. That's my hot take of the day.
Hard disagree.
But yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, man, I feel like you're probably an Android guy or a Samsung, whatever.
I'm a MacBook user, but an Android boy. Can't help it.
Wow. Okay. All right. Interesting setup there. Well, I'll say we both interact with great software and hardware every day, from our phones to our computers to iPads or tablets, etc. Plus many other things within our homes throughout socialization. So like, it's in our world every day, but yet there's a lot of pieces, like you said, not just in our industry, but outside that, it does kind of suck. Like, you're like, what the heck? Why is this not easier? Why is this not more simple? And one of the things I think about, especially like looking back at Steve Jobs and hearing about Tim Cook and the way they brought, the whole Apple ecosystem together and all these other things, that to make something simple, you really, it takes like a lot of work. You can't just start out creating something simple, because there's so many pieces behind the scenes. And as a non-technical founder, for me, that doesn't, like, I couldn't wrap my head around that. Like, how can you not make like this app super simply clean and like easy to look at and to use? And so I love your thoughts on simplicity in our industry, because I think from a property manager's perspective, if you take the listenership of Slick Talk, right, we have a mix of traditional VRMs, some new Airbnb host styled operators, and then of course like a hybrid of the two, and then even hoteliers, right? Like, people start in this industry with short-term rentals, and they buy hotels, and here we go, implementing the hotel / short-term rental practices into the hotel, getting rid of front desks, using smart locks, all the good stuff. So taking that demographic, what do you think in the tech landscape today can be simpler for the operator? Like, what pieces would you even look at on making something more simplified when it comes to the operations?
So you did this last exchange here made me think of a quote I just heard on another podcast, like literally 3 days ago, which is, simple is not equal to simplicity. So like, to create a user experience that is really simple and intuitive is not easy. I think you're kind of getting at that. But I think when it comes to like where simplicity and ease of use could be improved when it comes to like operations of any kind of short-term rental manager. I think it really comes down to solving their actual problems, not just building bright and shiny features that you struggle to get adoption with, which we've been guilty of in the past, but really looking at various workflows in their day-to-day or month-to-month and figuring out where are the areas where this is really taking way too much time. Like there's definitely bottlenecks here that we could clear up that would make this process go a lot easier. There was a good interview with Jeff Bezos a couple months ago on the Lex Friedman podcast, and Bezos talked about this concept of paper cuts, where you have your core features and your core functionality, and those things are going to be sticking around. You have to invest heavily into your core, and the way you can identify the core is, say, in 10 years, is this still going to be the core? And if the answer is a definite yes. So I think managing listing assets and managing bookings and distribution, that's not going anywhere. And then there's paper cuts, things that kind of eat away at the user and they can live without it. But when you compound these paper cuts, it adds to something that's a much less rich experience, I guess. So direct examples, I think, would be the process of closing out a month-end accounting type stuff, right? Where a lot of management contracts with property owners will say something like, we'll definitely have your statement process no later than the 8th or the 10th of each month, kind of a thing. And they're definitely adding in a couple buffer days there, but especially at scale, and if it's not really optimized, make no mistake, it's taking probably a few people several days each month. And that's very taxing on not only the user, it's also reducing time they could be spending on other value add tasks. And then it's also getting the owner what they are looking forward to each month a little bit later. So, what we work on and some major efforts we have underway to continue to chop that time it takes to process month end as an example. Yeah, I think there's a lot of parallels, I think, to other operational tasks, but I think that's kind of a big one that really involves several modules, data from several different modules feeding into a process and a workflow that's pretty complex and really doesn't have a lot of room for error.
Outside of the closing out each month process, which is taxing on, human capital, and owners get frustrated because it can be inaccurate, it takes whatever. Outside of that, where else do you think property managers today are getting a bunch of paper cuts? Like what are the paper cuts today?
So I think the logical starting point is relationships. So who are the stakeholders in this business? I just went with owners. The other stakeholders are team members, employees, and vendors, and then of course guests who really make everything go round. So you could really dive into any of these relationship categories, and I think it all boils down to what the tech stack is and what the level of usage and adoption is of the tech stack, and I mean adoption across the extended team, right? So what is the process for handling arrivals and departures with guests? Depending on how old school or how new school you are, there could be a lot of paper cuts in that, and a lot of time spent resending information and manually texting, that sort of thing. And then you go on to team members, for instance, and you need to onboard a new team member to the system. And if it's a very complicated user experience, there's a learning curve and a ramp up just to be able to allow that person to rely upon themselves to use the systems, and associating those team members with the data they should be associated with. If they're not, then there's a lot of extra nonsense and noise, I guess, in the platform, in the instance. So yeah, I think it really boils down to workflows surrounding, relationships is probably where I go with it. And there's a lot of, Andrew touched on innovation, with respect to consolidation and how that can potentially negate innovation moving forward. And there's just a ton of amazing third-party partners that we work with that really excel in several of these pay-per-cut areas. And, it's our job at Direct to provide a experience for the system of record that is configurable and modular and allows them to kind of really build the tech stack that they want. So if it's us being, a 20% hub for these integrations, allow that to be the case. Or if they're leveraging our native systems, really we invest in those quite a bit too. I think that's one of the PMS world, which is such a funny acronym. Like my sister's like, what?
I know.
Your PMS? Like, even our Twitter handle is, I'm trying to get Direct Software. It's Direct PMS. And it's hilarious. But the PMS, there's definitely a love-hate relationship there. There's not, it's something that we're charging hard on. We're changing, but in general, there's a whole lot of love, I think, for a lot of third-party systems that are highly specialized, whereas the PMS doesn't get a lot of love. And that is, to me, something that needs to change. And we're changing that because it is the system of record. There's a great deal of data housed in the system of record. And part of my kind of thesis early on was that, wherever we can be best in class, with native solutions, we should invest heavily in those. And we haven't stopped on that. It's a process and it takes time, but yeah.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to pick, and I wanna take the innovation conversation and move that a little bit further into the episode, because I would love kind of your hot take and even just perspective on property management softwares. You just kind of said, like, they don't get a lot of love. There's a lot of specialized software out there, from pricing tools to ops tools to accounting, etc. And they do get a lot of love because they do, I think when you are specialized in that way, there's a huge, I guess, lift off the shoulders, right, of whoever's in that seat in that company and using that software, right? Property management software, I think everyone kind of has their hand in, from reservationists to maintenance, even to, managers, owners, etc. And so I think, like, from the property management software piece, would love to know, because I think one thing I've seen a ton, specifically, like, coming from hotels to vacation rentals too, I know it's obviously not easy, and every business and property is different. So you can't have like a self onboarding, but do you think like onboarding today is kind of a little crazy for onboarding a new property manager to a software or property management software? Like, what are your thoughts on like a self onboard and like creating a way that people don't need to schedule, an onboarding call 3 times in a month just to act like pull over one listing or whatever the case may be for some of the softwares that are out there today?
From the start, we've invested in onboarding systems, and excited to share our latest at Verma International in October. But essentially, there's a couple different ends of the spectrum. I agree with you wholeheartedly that vacation rentals are very unique, just as an asset class. There's so much variance between each of the units and whatnot. It really boils down to how complicated the data integration, and I mean that in terms of the customer that's onboarding, how complicated their tech stack is. Where's all their data at? So if you look at somebody who's brand new to the space, they've got a couple of units, of course, self onboard. If the data is primarily housed in a single channel, meaning they're just on Airbnb, they just have reservations on Airbnb, their messages are there, well, then it should be a single click onboarding, which we offer on the RV rental side with our first integrated channel, RV Share, and we are almost done with it on the vacation rental side with Airbnb. With that said, single click onboarding is tough for a management company that has a lot of their eggs in many baskets. So they've got a strong direct presence with 65, 75% plus direct booking volume, and they're on this PMS or sometimes multiple different systems of record. They've got their data in a variety of different channels. So when we think about like our onboarding playbooks, there's very deliberate order of operations with when we add, import data initially and when we re-import data and whatnot. But with that said, we've built allows for taking non-normalized CSV information. So from literally every single data set in our system, from listings and properties to bookings and people, and allows our team right now, our team, we don't have this user facing, to be able to take these non-normalized files and drag them into the system, and then they auto map to the corresponding fields. Those CSV headers auto map to the corresponding fields. Where we're about to be with this is on steroids, and the experience leverages machine learning and basically has a really delightful front-end experience that does allow for a large enterprise-grade management company to do a lot of the work. And I think one of the shortcomings that we've seen in these big, long lines waiting to get into some of these incumbent systems is that number one, the technology to integrate the assets and the data has room for improvement in a major way, but also there's teams or sometimes, a assigned onboarding rep that can change throughout the onboarding experience, that are kind of in the dark with what's going on. They, do their best to understand and fill out type forms and whatnot, but ultimately there's not enough reliance or willingness to allow certain team members on the customer's team to handle a lot of the work. If they know the systems and they know the data, they, in a lot of cases, are going to be best suited to get that into the system. And I think the challenge with onboarding and setting onboarding timelines is, as the software vendor, right, we have a good sense of what we can accomplish and when, but it is a kind of give and take with, we can get you live by this date if you're willing to put in your, fill your side of the bargain, I guess. But yeah, I think that the not so distant future, the very, this year, will be providing some incredible onboarding solutions. And I'm a heavy user of software and just to run the business, and, things like related to payroll software and sales and cap table and equity management. And, right now I'm happy to say that I'm using the best of the best of these systems. There's been this kind of Stockholm syndrome I've had with a couple of them for several years, where it's like just the worst experience ever. Yeah. And like anytime I perform any action in these systems, I have to call somebody every time. And so I've finally gotten away from all those, but these are more mature software industries that have gotten a lot more capital. I mean, you think there's been a lot of capital in our space, sure, as of late, for sure, but these other industries are just orders of magnitude greater. And the technology that they're using in the front end components and whatnot are just incredible. And, we stay ahead of the curve. We've got the most, our tech stack is extremely modern. So it's very easy for us to incorporate new technologies where it's difficult for the incumbents to do the same. And the reason is not only that their technology's outdated, in a lot of cases, you have to really start over, but that's not really an option. So then they also have quite a bit of tech debt that's accrued. And I've been there, we've been paying down tech debt for years, early on in direct, when we didn't have the right, front end team members, and we had back end engineers that were developing front end interfaces. And so that's one example, but also from like a database architecture standpoint, there's a lot of tech debt. So totally just went off on a tangent, but long story short, I think that I definitely think that's a huge issue, and that onboarding and just switching systems is so painful. It's so costly. It's so time consuming that it creates just so much inertia. It's a frustrating amount of inertia, actually. And, getting over the hump and providing a solution that is beautiful and intuitive and allows for the customer to participate as much as they want is where we're just about to be. And then I do think that we'll get to a point in not so distant future, possibly as little as 24 months from now, where we can have almost a one-click onboarding experience. And we've been through that, how that could work. And could definitely talk your ear off with, the latest technologies and how that could play a role in it. But it's exciting.
Before we go into the main question I wanted to ask, can you, just for the context and like the sake of the listeners who aren't familiar with the term tech debt, can you explain that really quick?
Yeah. So technology debt, the second word is what it sounds like, but essentially there are certain decisions made and time and resources invested and code written, lots of code written. It was not done in a way that's optimal. So that requires, in a lot of cases, code refactoring, major code refactoring. So what that means is you've got this huge area of the code base with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of lines of code that handles this or that module or this or that feature. And the feature behaves how we want it to, in terms of like, I want to perform this action, put in this input and get this output. However, it's not optimized whatsoever. So it's not as simple as just tweaking a few bits of code. You have to refactor the code. You have to rewrite it so that it still kind of meets the same acceptance criteria, but is run much more efficiently for a variety of reasons. Maybe in a lot of cases, performance related or reducing error reduction, stuff like that. So yeah, technology debt then is when you've got months or years of making decisions that weren't so great. And it's just not as simple as snapping your fingers and solving it. You actually have to pay down that debt. And it's exactly the same thing, because you have to put time and resources towards it. And we all know that amounts to money. So,
well, I'm glad I asked that, just because I think I know what it is. And on our other podcast, Good Morning Hospitality, we talked about how Expedia was talking, or specifically Vrbo was talking about, their tech debt and getting out of tech debt into a better technology system in order for the Vrbo experience, the Expedia experience, and all the other channels that they have from a back end perspective to be a little bit more caught up to date. And so paying down that tech debt. And so for me, I got that, but I think just for the listeners who aren't on the technology side and are just pure operations, I think it's important.
Yeah. I mean, that there's quite a bit of that for sure on the B2C side. Not to pick favorites, but Airbnb is by far the easiest to work with from a technology standpoint. I know there's going to be people who are fuming right now on the operator side of things, but just from an API, reference, ease of working with and whatnot. But yeah, the others are definitely getting better, but yeah, on their end, a lot of these systems are, 1 to 2+ decades old. They're high quality, high functioning systems and highly reliable to the end user, but to integrated partners, it's challenging to pay down that tech debt, I think. And I would love to be able to snap my fingers and have all of the partners that we're integrated with on the marketplace side of things have documentation and APIs we talk to that are kind of on the same protocol and really easy to work with, but can't have it all.
One day. For all the property managers listening, you're all hearing that you can't just, your vendors, your tech companies that you work with can't just snap their fingers and fix a problem just like that due to something called tech debt. That's not the only reason, but it's probably one of many, especially in our industry. But I want to go back to another point you said earlier, and you're talking about data, right? So for a brand new host or a property manager, they have nothing. They just need to onboard, and it should be able to be done. I guarantee if you were to sit down with me and my business partner, Adam Knight, with our management company and say hey, let's import today, I won't even know where to begin with where our data is at outside of our current property management platform to then, our ops platform to then all these other things, right? I won't even know where to begin. So I think a lot of operators hearing that, it's probably either confusing or frustrating, or maybe just kind of going right above you, where in the sense of we're operators, we're trying to provide hospitality, create great businesses, are profitable, sustainable in our local economies and markets, providing jobs and creating great culture. Those are top of mind, everything, right? And then you think about yeah.
Amen.
And then you're wait, I have to manage data. And I don't think, especially when I first, full time with Hospitality FM and doing my own business full time and not having a W-2, I never realized how much data we actually do hold. So kind of give me your perspective on the data piece. Where should operators today, if they're concerned about their technology stack and potentially wanting to move or to replace things or to even just understand where their data is at, where do they begin? Where do they start?
Yeah, I think first of all, taking inventory, which you should do today, on your tech stack. as a software company, we have a tech stack that is greatly different than any operator. We'll have some overlap with inter-team communication tools and whatnot. But in general, it's, I think, just a good business practice to take inventory of your systems so that you can kind of monitor not only the budget you're spending on the software, but also to make sure that you're being as efficient as possible. So I think taking inventory of like, what are we ultimately using? So if we think about a database, like a database that would be in the PMS, what is involved in that? What are the various data sets? Well, you kind of take it from the top to the bottom. So what's the most important thing, well, in the entire ecosystem of a vacation rental? I don't need to put you on the spot.
Yeah. Syncing your calendar, right?
It's just the unit in general. Like that's,
I was like, the unit. I'm going a couple steps after.
It's like, what could we totally not live without? It's the actual asset that we're renting out, right? So you kind of start there and it's like, what are the various data sets that are connected to a unit? Well, you kind of start by like looking at a listing inside of a channel or inside of the management system. And there's going to be a lot of fields, think of it like a form. So there's all the data pertaining to the property info, right? All the headlines and descriptions and photos. And then there's all of the bedding details and amenities and availability defaults and pricing defaults and custom calendar, whatnot. Who are the people that are associated with this listing, whether it be team members or employees or housekeeping or maintenance tech vendors, property owners, right? So like, these are all things that feed into the listing. And then what else is connected to a listing? Well, you've got all of the rules for the listing, things like fees and taxes and deducts, right? Inventory items, those sorts of things. You've got reservations. You've got, where do you get reservations from? Well, you're getting them from your direct booking website. You're getting them from the various channels. What happens, and if we're talking like end to end, what happens when the money comes in and what happens when it goes out? Well, you've got all these various statements for stakeholders like owners or vendors or whatnot. And you've got all of your reports, and depending on how deeply involved you are in accounting, you've got your chart of account balances for all of your GL accounts. And the data it's definitely can be overwhelming, but taking inventory and figuring out what is the data that absolutely unequivocally native to the PMS. It's a lot of those things I mentioned. And then you think, what else are you using? Are you using disconnected third-party call center solution or SMS tool, or are you using something else for maintenance work orders? Is that or is that not connected? If it's not connected and you can't extract the important data from there, well, make sure you can take inventory and access that data if you're transitioning. But in general, you want to be taking inventory and knowing where your data is. And you also want to be considerate of, how do I get that data transitioned over and moved over to a new system? So if you're one of those managers that is very, very much up to snuff on accounting, when do you want to switch to a new system? If you switch mid-year, is that gonna work for your owners? And the end of the year, having data on two systems, can the PMS support migrating all of the accounting data? Can it retroactively create ledger transactions for past and upcoming bookings that weren't generated in the system, that were imported into the system? We can do these types of things at Direct. But data is where it's at for sure. That's data's king. Just think, if you and your business partner woke up tomorrow and all of your data was gone, what would you do? You would freak out, right?
Yeah, I would just leave. I'm like, all right, I'm done.
If we really gave it our all, like it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. It's really interesting. And I think, it's not something I think we think about on a day-to-day basis on the property management side. If you're more like established and have a lot of density and inventory and you have the right people in the right seats, and then you can kind of step back and think about, how are we managing our data and keeping inventory of that, and, have that be under someone's role, whether it's you as a CEO or you have a COO maybe, or a CTO. Yeah, that makes sense. And so I'm also curious, let's go back to the episode with Andrew. We talked about 21 different verticals. There's so many companies, like so many startups, so many that have been crossed over from hotels to STRs that kind of service both. And then you have a lot of the legacy that have been around, home away days, right? Like the early legacy softwares and tech. What do you like? I don't know. I made the point to Andrew saying like I think it might be a little too much, right? Like I think we have a little. I think we have enough. I think we're good. We're good on software. But yet, to Andrew's point, no one's mastered it. Like, I feel like no one has actually made the all-in-class software or product of their category, whether it's a property management side or access control or noise or revenue or whatever. So where do you stand? Is it too much? Can we slow down? Can we like take a moment to like let the actual current technology actually become good? Or does that just defeat the whole purpose of innovation and letting someone come in and just crush competition? Like, what are your thoughts?
Capitalism. Yeah, no way. Never stop. I mean, it's like,
yeah.
I feel like we should just like stop small businesses. We have enough small businesses in America. Just stop. Let's just let everybody kind of marinate, entrepreneurs just kind of chill out. Got enough, boutique ice cream shops. No, I mean, that's, if that happened, there wouldn't be incredible new restaurant concepts coming out and all that. So I definitely am sorry for the Will beat down, but I'm definitely on Andrew's corner there.
No, I'm on the same side, but it's like from an outside perspective, you're like, holy crap, as an operator, you look at that chart and you're just like, there's so much tech, and yet a lot of them is fluff. A lot of it's, not very great. It's old, it's new, but not like they overpromise and underdeliver. There's a lot of that I see. So that's why I kind of get like, where do we go from there?
Yeah, I think
I'm a capitalist too. FYI for the listeners, I love capitalism.
It's important to recognize in our seat, like, yes, you're an operator and stuff, but you're an expert.
Yeah.
You're rubbing shoulders at all the shows. That sort of a chart, a lot of people aren't seeing. So like you have direct line of sight into how insanely innovative and competitive it is, right? But I think it all comes down to how vendors are standing out in the crowd. And that crowd is in a variety of different forums, from online to ads you're being served up here and there. And if you click skip within the first 2 seconds or not, to trade shows, ideally the trade shows that don't suck, that are a good use of time for everybody. But in a lot of those cases, even those could be overwhelming. There's a lot of booths and you got to stand out in the crowd and stand out in the clutter. And I do think that, anecdotally speaking, the last Verma International was art. And these shows, in a lot of cases, there's so much energy and everyone's like, yeah, let's do stuff together. And then there's a cycle after where you have to kind of close the loop on various things. But there was definitely, I would say, finally, this something in the air that was just kind of like, these same logos, the same, what logos I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the really specialized ones. But what if that wasn't the case? If it was just to play devil's advocate, we cut to the chase and all it is those logos. They've got it all. What would it be like at those shows? It wouldn't be great. And obviously that our the spirit of at least the country that you and I are in right now wouldn't go there. But I definitely think that innovation is it's among us, and everybody's capable of being an innovator. Just the other day, I don't know how I hadn't seen it before, I saw a really cool accounting platform called Boom. It was actually yesterday. They, from what I could tell, are really kind of focused on the property owner experience on the accounting side of things, and the property owners are their customer, but just allowing them to really make, ultimately, like, in technology, our objective is to solve problems. It's not to introduce problems or try and introduce different ways of doing things that ultimately aren't solving problems. And what does that really mean? It ultimately comes down to saving time, saving money, and being able to use the system functionality and the data that's presented to make better decisions, day to day, week to week, month to month, year over year kind of thing. So I think the Boom sounds really cool because their focus is on making it so that property owners have as much data at their disposal to make better decisions and on their investment property. I think it also, from what I could tell, does help with the relationship aspect of the property management company and the property owner. And they're getting these postcards, every day from these competing companies. And yeah, so I was excited to see that one yesterday. Actually, it was another tangent. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm here for it. I'm totally here for it. I would love to know, before we fully close out on the episode, is outside of your category, because you're a property management software, you're in that space. Outside of that category, what other category from that discussion and that chart are you bullish on? What one do you think, like, this category has a lot of great players, great teams, great product, but do you have a category that you're a big fanboy of right now?
I hate to do this, but I'm pretty bullish on the PMS side of things right now. I can tell you why.
Come on, you gotta give me another one.
I could tell you why if you want to know. But no, I can keep going. I think that really anything that is harnessing the latest trends in technology, which is really artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, anything that's headed in that direction or has the ability to add value is very, very exciting to me. So I did a post on LinkedIn the other day. I don't do posts too much, but sometimes they just come to me and I'm just like, I must post. So I just posted kind of gratitude for AI tech and ChatGPT, which I use it. I literally use it every day, and I'm not trying to sound cool, but it's just amazing how quickly it's changing and how I could just see the future of it really making us kind of superhumans in business. And then even with my kids, creating custom GPTs for them to help them with school and learning, and it's multimodal so they could talk to it, and it has a tone of voice and level of patience that is just blows my mind. But I think in general, like there's a guy on LinkedIn, I won't name, but he's kind of a troll. He's been trolling me and just seeing him troll other people, like just saying that AI sucks and ChatGPT doesn't really work. And it's kind of like, you're just missing the boat here, because when you look at the growth of just technology and computing power over the last 50 years, it has been completely exponential. So you start from the beginning of history with like vacuum tubes and transistors, and then into microchips and microprocessors. And then you get into the 70s and 80s with personal computing, and then internet in the 90s, and mobile, and phones, and, big data and cloud computing. And what else am I missing? Blockchain technology. And then getting to today where we've got this like AI and machine learning. And again, this latest cycle here, I think it's going to have the biggest impact on humanity. Like when you look at the global economy, that's really just effectively the number of people multiplied by the productivity per person. And like AI and robotics is really going to be a total game changer. And the future is quite abundant in terms of how much free time we have to do other things. So I'm cautiously optimistic. What does it mean for humanity in terms of what we're going to be doing to occupy our times in 20, 30 years? And my kids, I don't know, but I'm optimistic about it now. And as it relates to our space in general, things are changing daily, weekly, monthly, and the experts don't even know where this is going to be in 3 years from now, what the world looks like. But we're definitely getting ahead of it. And I know that some others that are integrating with us, like Host AI and ones like that I think are really cool tools, but we're just really scratching the surface on it. I think where it's going goes beyond streamlining communications and listing content type stuff like that. Like I think it really, if you think about the future of superhuman capability, typing in a prompt and waiting a few seconds to get a result and reading it, but eventually it's going to allow us to just think on our feet much faster, more efficiently. And then I think just agents that we talk about paper cuts and we talk about efficiencies, just like what are these tasks that you're running over and over every week or every month or every day. And I think those can be very much streamlined. But that's just my perspective. I think that there's multiple players that are either already working on something in these different categories, or they're thinking about how they could do it. It's still very early, so it's wide open. Long-winded answer.
No, again, my job is to be a better listener than talker. So truly, this is like fascinating. I think you bring up some stuff that maybe I didn't think about or I thought about, but maybe in a different light. And I think maybe that's opening up part 2 for this to come out in the future. But I want to say thank you for, taking your time to sit down and not only just sit down and do this recording, but you've engaged with the content from listening to commenting on LinkedIn and creating the conversation outside of the audio. So that's my biggest accomplishment, is like, if we can get the conversation outside of the episode, then that's when we've done our job. So thanks for helping that move along. And I seriously appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. For the listeners, where can they find you if they were interested in talking to you?
Find me on LinkedIn, Wes, W-E-S, Smith. I have an E at the end of my name, S-M-I-T-H-E. You can also email me at wes@directsoftware.com.
Cool. And for the listeners, links will be in the show notes. You'll have all the access there. So make sure you grab that if you're interested. Wes, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And
Will.
like always, everyone, of course, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys all again. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week.